7 members. So we're okay there. Minutes of the previous meeting. December 13th, 2017. Are there any changes or omissions, additions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of December 13th, 2017 as written.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Treasurer's
Thank you.
reports. In yellow in your packet.
So, yeah, so we combined December and January treasury reports together. Because you're not approving those anymore anyway, you're just reviewing them for accuracy and asking questions and then approving the audited financials at the end of the year. But overall, we're doing quite well. We have a net income of $35,000. 26 of that is from net operating income, and then we do have some investment gains that keep the market keeps on going up and down. You know, a lot of that is the HHW program coming in on budget this year for a change. It didn't. You know, we're used to starting $20,000 or $30,000 in the hole because of a successful household hazardous waste collection, too successful. You know, the more people that go, the more it costs, and what we get from the communities is fixed. So when there's more people that attend that, but we were successful in negotiating that fixed price contract with for household hazardous waste hauling, which makes it a lot easier for us to budget. What else? We also had a big month of the USDA. We only bill every quarter, and then we had some payment of some contracts that were held over from last fiscal year, Waconia Master Plan and culvert studies. So that also helped to explain the increase in net income for the organization. If there's any other questions on that, I'd like to answer them.
What's the professional expenses, what's that?
It's mostly brownfields.
Okay.
The lion's share is brownfields.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, and so we're really starting to move along with that program, and we have a lot of sites that we're working with that program. We're engaged with the Waconia State School on spending a good sum too. The only thing we're running a little bit behind on in the brownfields is finding petroleum sites. We're supposed to find, it's harder to find. A lot of those gas stations and other petroleum sites have already been worked on. So we're needing to do some more outreach on finding brownfield petroleum sites. The rest of that funding is basically obligated and called for now. We've done a lot in Franklin on that. We do a lot in Ashland with the Packard Mill. But we have a really nice project in Franklin where it's right by where Main Street and one of the state routes come together. That we're helping to redevelop a site there. The city's involved with. So that's a really positive project. And I think we're going to probably, when we get to talking about commission meetings, I think we have to have one in that sub-region coming up. And I think we'll be doing that in May, at a Franklin Brownfields discussion in May in Franklin.
Jeff, talk a little bit about the gasoline price from DOT.
Yeah, so DOT had entered into a 3-year buying contract, and it was way higher than than the market price of gas. So we've been buying gasoline at the pump for the last couple of years because it was substantially cheaper than buying it at the state gas pumps. But they have now renegotiated that contract, and they have tagged it to market price. So we should be able to start purchasing our fuel at the state fueling stations now. It's not to exceed $2.13 a gallon, which, you know, if you look at the price this morning, it's about $2.40, $2.50, depending on where you are. So $2.13 is actually a very good price.
Yeah, but that's, you don't pay market price. You can exclude the state and federal taxes.
Right. I believe the state taxes are already excluded from the state pumps,
Yes, they are.
but the
I don't-
federal taxes aren't.
Do you know that? I don't know that.
Yeah, they're not.
They're not.
They're not. We have to apply separately to get that paid back.
So, in addition to the $2.13, you'd also get additional discount by not having to pay tax. Is that what you're saying?
You can apply for what Jeff's saying is you can apply for the federal tax relief
Right.
against the 213.
I believe the 213 includes the federal tax, so we
You're
would get
saying
more than
different.
that.
Oh, has not been excluded from that 213
Correct.
number.
Yes.
The state tax has,
Yeah.
not the federal.
Where's the nearest depot?
Huh.
Where is the
Well, there's
I
one
don't
on 106 in Belmont, and there's one on 140 in Belmont. I know that much. Up here, I don't know where they are.
What's it, where you
State-
get
state
gas?
fueling
Yeah.
There used to be one on 104.
Yeah, there is one on 104, right before you get to the
You
interstate.
can park your cars there, but I guess you can go in and get your gas there. That's still there? Is that?
There's one in Campton, off of 93.
There was one in Tamworth.
Probably Concord, the state highway patrol facility, I would assume.
Wherever you have, I think wherever you have the trooper stations too.
Who is eligible, are municipalities eligible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I use a WEX card, which can go to any station, 99% of the stations take WEX cards. And they exclude the federal and state tax. So we don't have to apply for it, and try to get it back. It's taken right off the top, so I don't pay that.
Where do you get, who issues the WEX cards?
WEX, W-E-X.
It's a private company.
It's a private company, that are in, they sign up all the service stations, and I think each service station pays a small fee for that transaction. WEX is used by the school district, fire departments, municipalities.
We do have fuel cards. I don't know if they're WEX cards though. I'll have to double check on that.
Could we somehow, do they have a website, we could find out where the nearest depot is for
Yeah.
this thing? Within our area, within the Lakes region?
Yeah, we'll find that out and get back to you. I'm not sure where it is.
Just a
I think
reference.
104 is probably the,
Closest.
in Meredith, by the state garage down there, I think is probably the closest one.
Closest to here, yeah.
Right
John?
near the exit, actually.
Yeah.
Exit 23.
When did that go into effect?
The new contract, within the last few months.
December,
Okay.
according to what you had written here, December 8th.
Okay, sounds right. Yep, that's what it says there.
John?
It was WEX?
Yep.
Oh, I see.
If you just go to WEX, plug it into internet, you'll come up with a website.
So I had gone onto the state website too, and you can find, under administrative services, you can find all these contracts. And basically, I was told that towns and governmental groups can take advantage of almost all of the state
Yeah,
contracts. And they have them on boots, they have them on
Oh, yeah.
fuel, they have them on, everything. So it's definitely something to take a look
The
at.
problem is they're usually long-term, and they don't they're not controlled by the market at all. I mean, they sign up, that's what they did last time, for fuel.
Yeah, the fuel, we got way out of line.
Yeah.
What was that site again?
It's administrative services. I can send you a link on that, too.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the treasurer's report?
Actually, on those administrative services, you can, other vendors will often match the prices too. For a municipality, you know,
Well, that's what it basically is. You don't use the state contract, but they'll allow you to take advantage of the price, I suppose. So you're not entering under the state contract, but you're just using the terms that the state negotiated. Janitorial services they have, there's just no end to it.
well, they have to watch what they are for things like tires and salt. I know the state contract for road salt is for a higher price than I'm paying with Morton by the ton. It's both coming from Norton, from the docks there.
What are you paying for Morton?
I think it's 57 something. A
For
ton.
Morton?
A ton.
That's pretty good.
And the state is $2 or $3 more.
I was told the state gives different discounts for moisture content too. If they come below a certain moisture content, they get a bonus payment, and if they're above a certain moisture content, they get penalized. So, because I know quality of salt is a big issue.
Well, the Granite states that Morton is better salt.
I've heard that too. Yeah, I've heard that too.
It's stored dry. But, so shop around. And also,
I've heard Morton was more expensive in the past.
It is. It's about $10 more a ton than Granite State,
well, you have
but you get what you pay for.
to negotiate.
And I think the problem was 2 or 3 years ago, there was a shortage. And the state contract wasn't selling, and a lot of people went to Morton because they had a ready supply.
Okay, any other questions on the financials? Jeff, anything else you want to highlight?
No,
Okay.
at this point.
Subcommittee reports, ARPC and legislative update.
So I have a couple bills I wanted to discuss, and then Bob has the grand list over there. But this one bill, 1436, is a bill from Representative Nurk from Freedom, and it does speak to determinations of regional impact. Right now, it's completely up to towns to make that decision, planning boards, but this would say that it would have to be a finding of regional impact if it was on a water body affecting more than 2 towns. And then there's some other rules regarding the shoreline protection. So he asked me to go, he was at our legislative reception at the Lakes Region Community College, and then after that asked me to go testify for his bill in Concord. And I told him I couldn't do that, but I could bring it to my board and have them consider it. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm not sure what the status is of it now, whether it's still alive or not, but it's an interesting bill.
He's asking for you to support this publicly,
Yes, yeah, testify on behalf of them.
which I think in the past what we've said is, we educate, but we don't. Yeah, yeah. Does anybody have an appetite to change that? I don't.
Not at all.
Okay.
I thought that might be the case. There's another bill, 1616, which would have required the regional planning commissions to go to the New Hampshire State Legislature to approve any federal funding that we might receive. So if we received a federal grant, we would have to go to the state legislature, ask them to create a bill to allow us to accept that funding, which is basically a
Wow.
backdoor attempt to, I would say, to undermine the funding that RPCs can get, because it just would not be workable. We couldn't wait for a bill to go through the legislature. So, that bill, I can tell you that bill did sort of go down in flames. The sponsor of the bill, I attended the hearing, and the sponsor of the bill came in, and the city and county subcommittee, you know, questioned him kind of hard about, you know, wasn't this affecting local control, and wasn't this, why RPCs have to, we already go through right to know, and we already have a intergovernmental review process, why would RPCs have to have a bill from the legislature to accept a grant? And he got frustrated and said he wasn't going to answer any more questions from the committee, and got up and left the hearing in a little bit of huff, and at the next meeting they voted unanimously to ITL it. Our Rosemary Landry was at the hearing and signed in favor of the bill. I just thought I would make that known. But it didn't go anywhere, and but we do have to take these sorts of bills seriously, because they would have a profound impact on our ability to function. So we have to, it takes a lot of time. It takes the DES and New Hampshire Municipal Association were there to testify on our behalf. And a lot of people have spent a lot of time going and making sure that it didn't go anywhere, which actually was the case.
Who was the sponsor of that bill?
Representative Amon, I think he's from Hillsborough County, somewhere. Hills 40.
What would be the advantage to anybody who required?
Well, I mean, he made comments like that federal funding was changing the character of New Hampshire, that RPCs were, you know, not being, nobody knew that we were a blind spot. You used the word blind spot.
This traces back to the Alton issue, the United Nations.
Oh, yeah.
Agenda 21.
Agenda 21
There were some kind
that
of,
endorses sustainable development, and the United States signed on to that, therefore any federal money is interfering with local. It's that connect the dots argument.
Okay, so that failed.
That failed, yeah, outright.
Wasn't there also about accepting money from other than federal? Last month or the month before, 2 months ago, didn't we talk about something?
It might have been this bill that we mentioned. I don't know of another bill that brought that up. The RSA is very clear that, you know, so this bill was completely against the current language of the RSA that says that we can accept grant funding and gifts.
Period.
Yeah. In furtherance of our purpose and goals, to support our communities. So, you know, it would have been a real, and how it just wouldn't have been able to be administered, and it was sort of it's a burden to the legislature too. I mean, it's, you know, the legislature doesn't have time to take up another. Oh, and there was a representative who made a very good point that every bill that's introduced into the New Hampshire legislature costs at least $1,200, you know, to administrate. Every time there's a bill, you know, all these people have to come around and there's some cost there. So every time somebody puts in a frivolous bill, you know, it's costing the taxpayers $1,200.
I think it's now $1,500.
Okay? I would imagine if you started valuing people's time, you know, the volunteers, the legislators and all the people that go to testify on those bills, it would be many times more than the 1,500, I can tell you.
Not to beat a dead horse, but to educate me a little bit, are there strings attached typically when we get some federal grant money?
You know, strings attached was an operative term that was discussed. And, you know, some people, I mean, maybe in your definition of strings, I mean,
Sure.
there's sometimes in these
Usually
grants,
some expectations.
like,
certain
that you
people.
will follow the 1973 Civil Rights Act, and you will follow the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. I mean, those are all laws
Yeah.
that you're legally bound to follow
Anyhow,
anyhow.
Right.
So,
That
Those aren't
and
strings.
administrative requirements in terms of reporting.
Right, there's reporting.
And documentation.
Sure.
and Tracking of funds. and
All those things make a lot of sense.
and the reporting requirements have become, you know, I think more burdensome, but, you know, people would agree, but I think that's part of being more transparent, and it's part of, you know, it's part of, you know, better, the oversight process. You know, we don't like the burdensome reporting requirements, but, you know, we live with them.
But we've never been given, you know, $100,000 said here, follow all smart growth principles or something like that, I suspect.
No, I mean, there was, I think the statewide,
Oh, yeah.
so for the Granite State Futures Project, what did have money from HUD, and there was, I think, but we sort of agree, there are New Hampshire smart growth policies
Sure,
that have been passed, and then there's federal, and they're really very similar. And I think there was some reference to those smart growth policies.
That would make sense, I mean, that's kind of what that whole project was about. In
Yeah.
many ways, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but there are things like, you know, they just reference either, I don't know, efficient ways of doing things or existing federal regulations and laws. So, you know, there's been, I think, some misinformation about, you know, that you'll have to accept refugees and things like that if you accept federal funds.
okay,
So,
what else you got for bills?
that's all that I wanted to highlight. I don't know, Bob, if you have anything you want to...
Well, the only one I'm really tracking is Senate Bill 450. This will only affect you if you have a municipal sewage treatment plant or stormwater management infrastructure. It was passed out of committee with a favorable recommendation and comes to the floor, Senate floor tomorrow. This is the bill for the state to assume responsibility for permitting point source discharges into water bodies, which currently is administrated and paid for by EPA, federal EPA. If the state takes it over, no money comes with it. And it's multi-million dollar per year just to run the program. So there'd be a tax or fee structure established for municipalities to take over payment for the program from EPA. So if it goes forward, it's going to be, for some towns, it would be.
But your committee is favorable to it?
The committee that was established last year was given 2.5 months to make a recommendation to the legislature as to whether the state should take over the program or not. What the committee said was, this is too complex an issue to resolve in 2.5 months. We had two work meetings, and identified all the issues that really had to be looked at. So this bill establishes a follow-on committee with funding, $350,000 for contract support to gather all the information and research legal issues, to make sure you have the right legal structure in order to assume this responsibility. For example, is it an unfunded mandate for towns? So there's constitutional even question. So this bill says you're going to need a year to work all this out, and you really need to understand the impacts of taking over this program, whether you really want to do it. So that's where it's at.
Okay. John?
Two questions. Isn't New Hampshire about the only one of the few states?
There's 4 states that have not assumed responsibility for this program: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Idaho, and New Mexico. And Idaho and Massachusetts are going through the process right now to file for to EPA to take over the program, but it's not a given in Massachusetts anyway. There's quite a bit of pushback for similar reasons, cost to the state. So we're and in some states that have taken over the program, there's been efforts to give it back to EPA because of lack of funding. And it's basically a science-driven decision process, and if you don't have the resources to provide the background work to make good decisions, you end up making worse decisions than, and of course EPA's been cut way back, 30% budget cut back in EPA, so there's questions as to whether they're going to be able to administer this program correctly, but it's a money, there's no question in my mind, given the resources, the state could run this program, and you can probably argue that they'd do a better job. At least they'd be more sensitive to local economic issues, and but without adequate resources to run the program, and as I said, it's big bucks, then you could end up in a worse situation than you are now with EPA running it. So, and our track record isn't real great on environmental programs, so.
Or instituting new
But
taxes
we
and
need
fees
to understand all the legal and technical and administrative implications of taking over the program.
Thank you.
I have a question that isn't about the current bills under consideration, but the recent one that was passed in August, I think, for tax incentives for municipalities. In fact, there's a warrant, there's a public hearing tomorrow in Tamworth on the various warrants. And last night there was an economic development meeting, and I was explaining to the committee, to the board, different points of that. And up until last night, I thought that if in fact the warrant were passed by the town, that it would be up to, if say Joe Houzias, comes in and applies for a tax incentive for his company or her company, whatever, that the selectmen would have the limits of what was passed at the town, of, for instance, 55 years or whatever number of years, and the amount.
Yeah, the percentage.
And the selectmen could then decide whether or not they would grant that.
No, it's not discretionary.
Exactly right.
Not discretionary.
That's so then I was told, hey, look, if it's passed by the town, we have a former rep on our board, and she kindly had done better research than I did. I've been pushing this for 2 years. And the selectmen at the moment are all for this. But I don't think they even realize, and that's what I need to note for you all, that if somebody applies, that's it.
It's
If they-
automatic if they meet the criteria of the
criteria.
regulation.
Yeah.
It's automatic.
So.
It's only good for 5 years,
Well, I know
That's right.
this.
but it's
I-
automatic.
And the criteria is very broad, it's just,
The criteria, well, it's commercial, industrial, expansion, or addition, or new, against all your taxes except state, education, and county. Those are not exempt.
so it's new and rehab too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's new expansion, any expansion or new.
Yeah. So that's pretty broad, any
Pretty broad.
industrial or commercial.
And my mistake, in reading, when you do a quicker read than or quicker than it should have been for me, there's the word may. And the word may, in closer reading, was a town may approve a warrant for up to
Right.
whatever, and I'm assuming for all this time, and I think the selectmen think, because of me, I think the selectmen think right now that it is also that they can choose to or not do or whatever. It's called, if you meet the criteria, you've got it.
You got it. Yep.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So what do you all think of that? I mean, what do you all think about that for a town?
I've added it to the Northfield warrant. I believe Tilton has added it to the warrant. That it's good for economic expansion,
Oh, I agree,
for commercial and industrial.
yeah.
I mean, if you don't want commercial or industrial, then stay away from it.
And then I was told by someone who's gonna oppose it and speak out against it, that he doesn't believe that there should be any relief for anyone, that people should pay their taxes and that's it. So I said, you mean to say that even the veterans, oh no, they shouldn't have it either? I mean,
Wow.
and I'm thinking, okay, that's not gonna be hard to argue against, but I just wondered about, in general, the conversation at our economic development meeting last night was sort of like, is that bad to, from economic development, I like it, and but I just want them to understand that they're stuck with it. And if they say, if it passes, that it's called anyone who passes it. And I think the most important thing I can do for everybody soon is what exactly is the criteria. You know, because that's not described when you just read the bill generally. What are the rules? And I think it's like they can't have anything happen before April 1st, and building can't have begun. And we have a situation in Tamworth where I'm wondering if it even fits it. And you may have read about it in the paper, that the what used to be the Brass Heart, and now it's the Shakura Preserve, their barn burned down totally.
Yep.
And they're gonna rebuild it all, and I don't know if that falls under, if rebuild better than it used to be, works for this. I'm just, don't know.
Sounds like new construction to me. Is it just on new valuation? New taxable valuation? Because the question I would raise and be concerned, would advise communities to look at is, what impact will that have on their will it have an impact on tax revenues? And will you have a dip in revenues or reallocation of costs if you're cutting the taxes on your commercial and industrial properties? You still need to raise.
You're not cutting
You're not cutting it.
You're gonna
So
get
it's just
whatever
on
you have.
new-
It's just on the new
New
or
part.
expansion
Okay.
portion of the assessment.
It's the new part.
So it's,
You never cut your taxes.
so it's, okay, so it's just on new valuation, it
Correct.
wouldn't be on,
So,
yeah.
Tamworth doesn't have a discount for a veteran in town?
They do, but I'm just saying this particular guy
Oh, okay.
personally doesn't believe that
Oh,
there
okay.
should
Any
be any.
abatements.
Oh, yeah.
abatements.
Tell them to move.
I know,
Tell them to move.
I could tell him more than that. I tell him where to go.
Move to Mexico.
Thank you, though, I didn't.
No wall, that way.
No wall.
It's only wall.
Dave, anything on the TAC? Or Jeff?
Well, there was no TAC meeting this week.
Okay.
We have the December
You have December and January.
in here. Do you want to talk about the rattlesnake? Were you there at the rattlesnake?
Let's see, I wasn't at the at the December meeting either.
Okay,
Um,
I just might mention that briefly because it might affect other people. There's a situation in Holderness. We had the meeting in Holderness, and the police chief was at the meeting, and the Squam Lake Association was at the meeting, and there was discussion about parking on the Rattlesnake Trail. There's Rattlesnake Mountain Trailhead there, and there's real issues with parking. There's all this on-street parking going on. It's a very popular, hiking destination. It's
Yeah.
advertised down in Hooksett at the rest area in Hooksett. The state markets it, and it's state-owned. But it's creating a huge transportation issue, safety issue, where people are parking
On the highway?
in the middle of, it's on a state road, and people are parking in the middle of on the side of the road, but hanging out and then walking down the middle of the street. They have pictures of, people with children and stuff strolling down the road, with cars on both sides, and it's just kind of a big mess. And they have asked that, and the locals have done a lot about it. The Squam Lake Association has created new parking, new off-site, off-road parking. I think they have at least 2 different parking areas that they've created, and they're talking about creating a third with a local property owner. But the property owner's saying, well, put some signs up first, and try to do something else. And if you try to do that, then I'll, and that doesn't work, then I will let you use my property for additional parking. But the state has refused thus far to add any signage about no parking.
Signage isn't gonna solve the problem. It's the most popular hiking venue in the
Yeah,
Lakes
rattlesnake.
region,
Yeah.
along with Mount Major on Winnipesaukee. And there's 2 trailheads there. There's Rattlesnake, which is, if you haven't done it, it is a spectacular, easy hike.
One of the best
Mount
views for the
Mount
least.
Morgan, right across the street, is the primary trailhead for the Squam Range. There's 2 or 3 ways up, but Mount Morgan is the primary one. So you have 2 major hiking venues right at the same spot, and there's just no place to park. So putting up signs isn't gonna, it just means people aren't gonna have access to those things, which you don't want either. So
But by putting up signs, it would convince, I'm told by Squam Lake Association, E.B. James, that it would convince this
people not to park there, but
property owner to allow another parking lot on his property.
yeah, the signs would prevent people from parking, so.
They park farther away. Have to walk.
Well, yeah.
It'd be more dangerous.
It's gonna walk anyway.
Yeah,
Drive somewhere else.
I'll drop you off here and I'll go park half a
I
mile
think
away.
Squam Lake, so they haven't, they've asked for signage help from the state. The state hasn't wanted to provide that, and I don't know the exact reasons why. Do you know why, Bob?
I don't.
The state is not in favor, but they said it's a common I know one part of it is, they're saying it's a common problem on trailheads around the state, and they haven't been willing to do the signage. And the TAC voted in favor of requesting the state to do the signage. And so wrote a letter to the state requesting that, and they wrote back, or they called me back and said, well, we've already looked at this and we decided not to. And I said, so now what? So now at the next TAC meeting, there'll be further discussion about it. I'm not sure.
I think it has to do a little bit with them being afraid of taking on some liability, because if they tell people you can't park there, people just park farther away and put them at more risk perhaps. We had a similar thing in Guilford where we have a big corn maze, and it's right on a state-owned road, and the town was encouraging, and the property owner wanted to put up a crosswalk with a light and everything and a sign so people can be safer during the time that that corn maze is operating. But DOT refused to do that. You'd think that that would be an easy
They've heard about,
accommodation.
I mean, they don't have liability, they have sovereign immunity.
Yeah, I would think, but I don't know.
We have
That's my guess.
Here's the same thing on Route 109 at 19 Mile Bay, where there's an ice cream place on one side and docks on the other, and people are going in the summer back to this all the time. They said if the town wanted to pay for it, the state was okay with that, they just wouldn't do it themselves. And the town wasn't willing, so there was a private investor who said he would contribute, but then he backed off, so.
Yeah, this the farmer was willing to do, pay for it all, but, well,
Yeah.
I don't know, that may not
Okay.
explain it, but.
Interesting anecdote on rail transportation, I think is fascinating. It'll only take a minute. The issue of putting in a spur up to Nashua, Boston to Nashua. It was on National Public Radio. The automatic vehicles are progressing so fast that looking 10 years ahead, a more realistic solution to mass transport would be an HOV lane on the freeways for automatic cars. So you just have basically a train of individual cars
All in the same speed.
automatic drive down Route 93. And when you stop to think about it, and they had all kinds of cost estimates. It would be cheaper. The basic infrastructure is already there. And 10 years from now, they're predicting there's going to be so many automatic cars around that would be a more realistic solution, and that public rail transport is past its time. There's something coming down the road, so to speak, that would be better, cheaper, and more accessible to people. You get to where you're going and you still have a vehicle to get around. So it was very, very interesting.
Assuming
I
you
hadn't
can,
thought of it at all.
yeah, but assuming you can park when you get there.
Yeah, you have to park when you get there.
There's a place to park.
Yeah, but people are parking now, the
Yeah, but a train would preclude the
train
requirement for
would,
that parking.
yeah. Well, that's part of the trade-off.
You get to Boston today, there's no place to park.
Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting, I hadn't thought about that.
Like a bicycle, you could, you rent it, you just rent it and then
You
drop
turn
it
it in,
out and drop
turn
it
it in.
when you get to where you're going.
Yeah, yeah, that would work. As long as you can be guaranteed your rental when you get out, go back home.
I heard something similar about trucking on a radio talk show. They were saying, yeah, if I was 40 years old and I was looking at possibly becoming a truck driver, okay, that might be worth it. But if I was 20, don't bother, because automatic
It's gonna be automatic.
trucks are
Yeah.
becoming the thing, or will be becoming the thing.
Yep, will be. Okay, anything else on those? Running out of time here, guys.
Sorry.
15-year-old personnel, I've got nothing. Executive report is in your packet. It's 2 months' worth there. Anything you want to highlight, Jeff?
No, not
Okay.
at the time.
Any questions on the executive? If not, we'll move forward. 50-year-old library at LRPC.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this issue either, but we have a 50-year-old library that's taking up a lot of space, and so if we ever had to move out of our space, we would have a real issue with all our stuff. And a lot of it, there's a lot of good stuff, but a lot of it's not very accessible. And it's frankly not used, a lot of the stuff isn't used very much. So I guess what I really wanted to engage with is this whole proposal here that talks about some of the benefits of preserving and why we need to preserve. We want content for the website, we need to save space. There are some really good resources that we'd like to make available. And some of it's getting so brittle that it's, if you don't scan it soon, then it's going to be, it's not going to scan well, it's going to be really hard to preserve.
What's the stuff, how old is the stuff that's brittle? Does it go way?
Well, just even you know, stuff that's 50 years old is just, it's fading and it's brittle and and then some of like I have this whole box as big as this desk in front of me, full of the old floppies. Did people remember the old 5 1/4 floppies?
Yep.
They were truly floppy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those, and then I have a bunch more 3.5-inch discs, and those aren't meant to hold data for any more than, I don't know, 25 or 30 years or something like that. So I've started to try to read some of those disks, and some of them we can't read the data off anymore. So we have all these floppy disks that we can't, only last for so long, and we can only retrieve the data from them.
You still have old minutes? Old minutes?
Well, see, we do have all the executive board and the commission meeting minutes, and I think those are of high value, but they're in
Binders?
3-ring binders.
Right.
And I think those definitely should be scanned. And we can scan them in a way that you have optical character recognition, so you can do word searches later. So that's something, we have about, I don't know how many there are, 40 or 50 3-ring binders with all of the minutes going back to the early 70s.
That
for the
paper must be
organization.
getting kind of yucky.
Yeah, but some of those are getting brittle and
Yeah.
they're ripping and things
Yellow.
like that. So that's an example of something that is a high priority to save. And there is, I did along with your packet, there are some laws on what records should be saved and
Right.
for how long.
Right.
But if you look on the last page of this proposal that I had sent out, the part where it says priorities for scanning, in bold. Just looking at, I just wanted some input from the board on, like I was asking Barbara this morning, we have probably 7 file cabinets full of town correspondence that we haven't been adding to those since I've been here, and I think before that it hadn't been. So the records in there are at least, they haven't been added to for at least 10 or 15 years.
Everything's on a disk now, and they do their own, so you don't need to keep those. That's why
Right.
they have typewritten and stuff like
And
that.
I haven't used it once, since I've been here, the office hasn't used it. It's a question of how long do we keep that? And when I look at the law, the RSA on it, it says that we should keep it for at least a year. Well, we've kept a lot of that stuff for at least 25 years and longer. I think probably a lot of that town correspondence could go,
Right.
even without scanning it. But it's that kind of question that I wanted to bring to the board. We have a bunch of aerial photos that take up a lot of room and space. I found the law says that we need to hold on to those permanently,
Wow.
the aerial photos, because they
Yeah.
provide historical information of,
Right.
okay, where was this structure back in 1978? You know, did someone kind of add to it or move it or something, so it can
Yeah.
have, have some legal standing involved in that. So some of the stuff, the EB and commission minutes, the law says that we should hold on to that permanently, and we would have done that anyway. LRPC published reports, I think we definitely should hold on to those and scan those and preserve those the best we can. Historic town master plans and land use regulations. We have, I don't know how many cabinets full, 5 to 10 cabinets full of old master plans. Go back to the 70s and
Individual
80s.
towns have those.
Yes, yeah.
So,
We
You don't know if yours are up to date or not.
ours are definitely not up to date. That we have the 3 versions before the up-to-date version.
Right, yeah.
So do we keep that?
I would
Do we-
discard them.
Or can we
Chuck
discard,
'em.
I mean, we could ask the towns if they wanted them.
Yeah, give them to the appropriate town, if they want.
That would be huge, if we could relieve ourselves of those.
Yeah,
I had a-
from the town.
I had a thought, we talked about this subject a couple meetings ago, I think, and it occurred to me, this might be one of those regional things that might be good to do, kind of like the energy cost savings or whatever. Maybe there's
Yeah.
a way for, because we have the same problem right now. We need to do some archiving of stuff. We moved from a second floor where we broke the floor because our records were, we had too many records, so we moved downstairs. We're on concrete now, and we have a larger cabinet area. We've added a couple of cabinets, and we're starting to fill that up. So we need to throw out some stuff or archive it at least. So I imagine we're not the only other town with that problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I remember when I was in Andover, they were talking about the load bearing on the floor, that the floor couldn't handle any more file cabinets. It was gonna collapse. So, and I've heard it from another couple of communities too, that it's just,
I've got the same problem now.
yeah, that it's. So, I mean, it might be one of those things, I mean, it might be a service that we could provide with this fancy software that we found, but, or it might be something where we do a joint contract, you know, a third-party outside firm, and maybe we can negotiate lower rates, you know, if we have multiple communities interested. It's just one of those things that everyone kind of agrees is a problem, but when it gets to
Yeah.
spending money on it,
Well, it's very labor intensive.
yeah, it's
Right.
very expensive.
I mean, I've done a lot of it in Ophir, and it's very labor intensive.
I think we said for each 3-ring binder that we have for the commission meetings, and we have like 50 of them, it's like, you know, half a day to scan those. To take them out and take the staples out, and, yeah, so it's a labor intensive and expensive undertaking.
On top of whatever you need for software.
And it's something that you don't need right away, but it's something that we have to think about.
Why
But,
sorry. Why don't you, for the next meeting, come back with, say, 3 different options and the cost thereof?
okay,
That way we can say something concrete and hopefully get some approval to something.
okay. Part of that is getting feedback from you on what you want to save and what you don't. I mean, I've heard already this morning, don't save the master plans,
No, get rid
don't
of it.
save the town correspondence,
Nope.
do save the minutes,
Yeah, you said you had
do
to
save
save
our
that.
reports, do save our aerials, because the law
Yeah.
requires that we have to do that. Contracts, I think we're supposed to save contracts for 7 or 8 years,
So get rid of them
but then after that,
Get rid of
we've already done a pretty good job of getting rid of that. Third-party reports, this is kind of a hard one, and we have some wonderful, you know, reports that have been done on water quality management, on, you know, every subject, A to Z. We have, you know, reports that have been done, but we don't use them. I mean, they're good reports that were done, but we don't use them. And I don't know we have a whole library of them, and what do we do with those?
These reports we did or reports?
No, this would be the reports we did, I feel we should definitely save. I'm talking about a good,
Stuff
you know,
we
a good,
received.
you know, a good thing on lake management from Illinois, because
Oh,
they
yeah.
had a great,
Nobody's used it.
report that they used there.
Get rid of it.
Maybe you should keep the ones that are from the last 5 years, but not beyond 5 years, because they could be useful. And also, it could very well be that when you do the streamlining of everything, maybe you could have priorities that, here are things we definitely can get rid of.
Right.
These are, we're not sure what we should do, and that could be another layer, another year kind of thing.
Right.
That way you could get rid of a lot, but still the questionable things that you could also decide later whether to or not.
Yeah, and I think these third-party reports, there's some real pearls there that I'd hate to just throw away, but,
Absolutely. I'm a saver.
Oh, gee, a
You're right,
hoarder,
John
a
already
hoarder.
took some of our old
Give 'em to
old
John.
equipment that were used for map making back before computers. He's got in his shed or something.
John will take them.
Seems to me one option ought to be, and I don't know how much of it would cover, but the first criteria, if it's not legally required, I would say
Get
get rid of it, except by exception, if there was a, a specific, unique document of some kind that's currently referenced, that we use or something. But other than that, why would we keep anything that we're not legally required to keep?
Right.
That's
Because you serve the communities within your district.
because we what?
You serve the communities within your region.
But the communities aren't using those documents.
If they have not been used,
Nobody's using them, John. Get rid of them.
You know those land use books? I don't know if people are keeping their land use books, but that's a good example of something that you should be throwing out.
Oh, wait, I do.
oh, every year you should throw those up.
Yeah.
Get rid of the
That's a
old
winner.
I mean, we had them for 30 years.
Throw them up.
Plus, and we had those beautiful, I don't know if you have legal books in your library, but they're beautiful with the nice binders and stuff and the gold lettering.
Oh,
and,
yeah, that's
you know,
very
those-
pretty.
But they're useless. I mean, they're worse than useless. They'll get you into trouble because there's old
They're out of
laws
date.
that you can't use.
Okay,
Question I would ask on photography, aerial photography, because I ran EPA's program at one point in time, is my bet would be most of it came from some other place. We didn't take the photography.
No, that's,
So it came probably
Yes.
Department of Agriculture. It's a major resource, so, I would suggest if we took the photography, then you might, be under obligation to keep it. If we didn't take the photography,
But-
if it came from, if we know where it came from, it's still there.
but the aerial, I mean, the RSA says that we're supposed to keep aerial photography permanently.
yeah, but that must be if we originated it.
I don't think so.
Doesn't
I
say
mean, if you
that.
get something sent to you, you can't be expected to.
Probably
It
get
says,
a
it
legal
says
opinion.
aerial photographs permanently, it doesn't
That's
specify who took them. I mean, we would take very few aerial photos, I mean, back in the day, you had to pay for a plane to
Right.
get up there, and it was,
Aerial photography was a federal mandate beginning with the Army Map Service in the late 1930s. And the rule was that complete coverage had to be done every 10 years, I think, forever. And there was some interruption in that service before the administration of it sort of ended up in the Department of Interior, the Department of Agriculture, sorry. And but that's some of that is the most useful information. If that's the principal place one would go to find old information.
I guess DES has come up to our office in the past before I started, come up to use our aerial photography, because they didn't have it to find where, I don't know, where the sand break was or
Right.
something.
Where the water used to go.
Yeah.
You get a lot of people using our aerial photos to verify if they had a dock of a certain dimension, so that they can show
Grandfather.
DES that we are grandfathered for that dock or whatever, so.
So it could be used for the opposite purpose too, somebody who just
Yeah.
kind of built it and
Yes.
never.
And
Use it
the
for that
fact,
as well.
and the fact that the state comes here to look at that information because they don't have it anymore, just demonstrates that you can't trust the state to do things, much less individual towns with respect to keeping old stuff. So if you supplying a service to the communities in our region, then I think we have to bite the bullet on some of this information that's important.
So what I might be coming to the board to ask for eventually is, should we use some of our reserves to make sure that we've archived what we need to archive for the region. I mean, I think right now I'm just trying to do it out of normal operating income, and I don't think it's, you know, but I want to be careful about doing that. I don't want to, it's not in the budget, and if I start doing that and then go over budget, that wouldn't be good, so.
I see a two-step process. I think first, let's make a decision on what we want to keep.
Yeah, we gotta identify
Then
that.
we make a decision what
Wanna get
form we're
rid of
gonna
it.
keep it in, how we're gonna pay for it. But I'd say step one ought to be to decide what it is we have an obligation or a need to keep.
Well, I think we have after this conversation, I have between the RSA that tells us we have to do certain things and just the feedback that everyone just gave me, I think we have a pretty good idea of what our policy should be, but I can write that up in more detail, maybe for another meeting.
Yeah, let's do that. I'd
Yeah,
like to see some
and
detail.
quantify it, you know, if we're gonna go beyond that and say, well, how are we gonna store it from here on out? Then we need to know how much is it, how much of it is there?
Then there's the question, you know, if we decide to keep it, in what format? I mean, I think it makes sense most of the time to put it in digital format, so it's more accessible, but there are some things like our minutes, I don't think, you know, we're gonna throw away our minutes, even we'll scan it, but keep the original too.
Why?
I don't know,
What does the law say on that? Do you know?
It says that we shall keep the minute, it doesn't say in what format.
Yeah, but there are other laws that says you can. There are other RSAs.
With right to know and stuff,
Right,
that says that
say
we
you
can
can't.
digitize.
We've converted all our minutes in Northfield to digitize.
I think you're in violation of the law then, because you have the article right here that we discussed by Chris Fillmore, and she points out that anything kept over 10 years can only be kept on paper or microfilm.
That was just changed
In the past,
about a year ago.
a year, okay,
Yeah,
well, that's good to know
you
then.
can do
So,
digital now.
How long should you keep minutes? How long do you have to keep minutes?
They-
It says forever.
Forever, it's forever.
Forever? Really?
Because the problem is there's actions in there, and there are motions and
So they could go
and
back
votes.
30 years?
Right.
Okay.
Audits, we only have to keep for 10 years. Budgets permanently.
Really? Oh,
I don't understand that one, but
well, no.
what good is a budget 20 years ago?
We used to be able to do that for 50 cents.
All right, so you're gonna work up some things.
Yeah, so I'll be more specific about what
Yep.
we want to try to keep and
Yeah, throw out.
throw out and somewhere in between.
I see on the RSA you gave us, it's not highlighted, but it says archives permanently. Now, what's an archive?
I don't know.
There's an archive.
Yeah, there isn't, there could be some more detail in this
On age.
guidance.
I will say, some of that stuff would be nice to make it available online. And I don't know if we want to do like the registry does, make it available for a fee, maybe recoup some of
Well,
your
I mean, you can go on now, I mean, what I'm doing is, you know, if you go on our website and you click on the Maps tab, then you'll see a couple, 5 innocent links of land use, conservation, you know, economic development. And we have we've scanned thousands of maps, I think like 3,000 maps, and they're all in there. So, and they're organized by community. So if you're interested, if you have an interest, go into our website, click on the Maps tab, and you'll find over 3,000 maps that were just in our collection
That's great.
that we've scanned.
Good.
That you know, that I think are it's great to make available to towns. I think we definitely could organize things better, and we will organize things better over time. But there's a lot of good information there, and at some point, when I got a little bit more organized, I was gonna send a request out to commissioners let them know that it's there and they should take a look at it.
I will look at that.
Yeah.
Because we have some old maps that are tattered, that I'm trying to figure out how am I gonna scan these, with our new scanner, to archive those ourselves, and if you've already got a duplicate of it here that you've already scanned, I'm just gonna
Right.
throw it out.
We have a wonderful map of Laconia, of all the historic sites in Laconia, you know, the first, before even the revolution. Beautiful stuff.
So I think you ought to get legal clarification. I don't know how many photographs you're talking about, whether it's worth worrying about, but.
We have thousands and thousands and
Okay.
thousands of
I think you ought to get a
slides.
legal opinion on whether it's photographs we took or photographs that are available, like John said, through the Department of Agriculture. If
Yeah, I can't.
If we know where we got them, and we got them from Department of Agriculture, then they're there. If you have a reference, you know, as to where the photography came from, you could get it again if someone needed it. But if it's,
Stuff we took, you think we
if
should
stuff that
hold
we
on to
took,
it?
I can understand, but stuff that we got from agriculture, Corps engineers or
We
whatever.
have a ton of photos that we did for sort of inventory, you know, just lakes management or inventory, like a corridor study. We'll have hundreds and hundreds of photos of you know, there's a beautiful photo of Holderness, you know, and all these cars from the 1950s, I think. But doesn't really show anything. So I don't know what we do with that. But, so we have tons of photos that were kind of used for data collection, for some sort of study that was long done. So should we keep those or not? So, anyway, thank you for letting me bother you with that issue.
You want to talk Plymouth before we go any further?
Oh, sure.
It's
Yeah.
not on the agenda.
Yeah, so Monday night, met with the Plymouth Select Board, and I think I sent an email telling most of this. They voted in favor of joining LRPC at the dues amount that we specified by the formula, a little over $5,000. And now the process is for them to send a letter to the state of New Hampshire, and for the state of New Hampshire to request comments back from the two RPCs affected, and then they'll make a decision, and then the governor's office will issue a new executive order if there's any change in boundaries. Some of you might remember that Wakefield and Brookfield at one point were part of this organization and moved to the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. So it's not uncommon, really, for towns to change regions. It's happened a lot over the last 50 years since RPCs were formed. And they just really feel that they're a better fit for the Lakes region. They have Lakes region towns on 3 sides of them. They have, you know, Bristol and Holderness and Ashland and other towns that they you know, really work with, and that they'd like to be part of this region. There, we work a lot with the PERLAC, Pembroke River Advisory Committee, and they're very interested in that. So I think they would be a good fit for the region, and they would bring in some extra dues. They would require some extra, you know, but we only get about 20% of our funding from dues, and we leverage 80% more in services, so we would take on extra responsibility having an extra community.
I think another advantage that I see anyway is having the Plymouth State University Environmental, whose theme is kind of urban, rural town support, is kind of integrating public policy and environmental issues, and having them within our region, both as a venue for meetings and whatever, but as a resource for however we want to use them. Of course, we could use them now.
Yeah, we do
but
use them now, yeah.
having them within our region, I think, would strengthen that relationship for whatever, internships,
Yeah.
research projects, chasing grants, whatever. They'd be a good partner.
Yeah, I mean, we've, since I've been here, we've had 1 to 4 or 5 interns from PSU working with us every year. On Friday, I'm gonna be meeting with a PSU professor, GIS professor, about updating our standard map sets that we have, that haven't been updated for about 10 years on our website, and he's gonna have his students work on that for us.
Okay,
So-
what do you need from us?
I think I'd like I think it's a good idea to add them to the region. I think we just need a vote of support that directing me to work with them on becoming a member of the region.
All right, I'll move that the LRPC Executive Board supports the request of Plymouth to join LRPC as a full member with all the normal benefits and responsibilities.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
All right, regional procurement update.
Okay, so, regional procurement update. So I've been meeting with a group, there's been a group of select boards that have been meeting around Molten Borough area, Molten Borough, Putnam Borough, Wolfboro, Sandwich, Tamworth, Meredith, and have been given, they were very supportive of the electricity aggregation, and they're very supportive of all 5 of these areas that have identified on the agenda of moving forward with regional procurement of these things. These are activities that the rates have changed on electricity, and now we estimate that we're saving our towns about $127,000 on electricity. We don't get paid for that work, though. That effort has to come out of our dues, discretionary funding dues. So I think it's a very smart investment for us to make, and a very smart way to use our dues to show the value of this organization. But it is an issue like the archiving where there's no special budget, no grant or anything that's going to pay us to do that work. So I did pass out a spreadsheet on catch basin cleaning, which we've been spending quite a bit of time collecting information on catch basin cleaning. It's been fairly, and we're missing a bunch of information, and it's fairly small dollars compared to some of the other aggregation that we've talked about. But one of the big benefits of catch basin cleaning is the whole water quality issue that currently a lot of towns don't have. Their catch basin cleaning program is to wait for a heavy rainstorm that'll flush them out, which and then there seems to be also some issues about what people do with the muck. There doesn't seem to be any standard way of taking that muck and putting it in a safe place that, so all that unfiltered water is going into our water bodies. So I think there's some environmental benefits. The Transportation Committee has an interest in this area. So we might go forward with the catch basin cleaning project where we would basically just negotiate a regional contract, regional pricing, and then each town would contract on their own with the advantage of the regional pricing. That's a pretty good model versus one regional contract. With the HHW program, we have one regional contract. But it's, there's a lot of advantage to just having regional pricing and individual contracts. So it's really just an update for you of this. This is basically what I'm seeing as my marching orders in terms of pursuing regional purchasing. And we have our hands full, and we need some additional. I need to staff up for it, and and that staffing is gonna have to be paid for out of our dues. So I have to be a little bit careful about what we can afford and what we can't afford. We did very well last year. So far this year, our financing is looking very good, and we should be able to absorb some of this extra work. But it's something to be aware of and to watch carefully. So for the next priorities, the electricity aggregation, we're planning on doing a June RFP this time, because we think we can get better pricing if we send out the RFP in June. So that's coming right up. If we're gonna send out the RFP in June, we really gotta get working on that. And then the oil and propane is another potentially huge savings area that we need to, if we're gonna do that, we need to, it's best to bid that out around June also. So I've got an intern, I think this summer, who's gonna help me work on it. I think I have a senior corps volunteer like we've had in the past who might be able to help me work on it. And we can use some of our existing admin staff, and we might have to hire some additional staff. The school bus contract is a really interesting one, where at least 2 or 3 school districts that I've talked to only have one vendor doing school bus, and they're not necessarily happy with the vendor, and they're concerned about the viability of the vendor, at least in one case. Those are about, the Mountain Borough School District spends about $500,000 a year on school busing. So there could be a substantial savings if we were able to add some competition into the arena. And part of the way you can add competition is by having a larger contract to bid on. You know, maybe some of those, it doesn't attract many bids because it's a smaller contract. Maybe if you make it a bigger contract, there would be more bidders. And there'd be more competition, and price would be able to be driven down, is the theory there. Same thing with solid waste. There's not a lot of competition. There might be 1 or 2 or 3, if you're lucky, bidders on solid waste in the region that I've been told several times. So again, we might be able to do some joint contract, bid out several communities' contracts at the same time, which would attract more bidders and hopefully leverage a lower pricing.
I have a stupid question on busing.
Yeah.
Do the towns own the buses?
No.
So,
I mean, they can.
but, so that makes this a little different on these other things. The infrastructure's already there. You have your catch basements, you need to clean them, or you're using electricity, you just need to pay for it. Here, the contractor has to make capital investment in the buses. So to jump from serving one town to find a contractor that would serve 10 towns, that's a pretty major capital investment for somebody to make, to provide all the buses. You'd have to buy the buses from these other companies, I presume, or something. So it's a little bit of a different, so how would that work?
I don't know. I mean, I think there might be busing companies that aren't currently in the market that would make additional investments for this region. I think one of the other complications on the busing issue is there's a shortage of bus drivers that I read about probably 6 months ago in the newspaper, the statewide. They're not hugely paying jobs with benefits and seasonal and other issues. So there's definitely shortage issues. So can we really affect positive change on the school busing issue? I don't know.
I think you can. Winnisquam is going through an RFP currently for July 2018 implementation, and we're not getting any response to RFPs other than the vendor that we've got currently. And when we go ask them, they say, well, you're not big enough for us to bid on it. Because to Bob's point, we gotta go out and buy buses, And the capitalization, okay, isn't enough to make it warranted. So they said, if you could get 3 or 4 other communities along with you, school districts, then it would be worthwhile for them to go bid. Because there are plenty of vendors down in southern New Hampshire that want to come up here. They just cannot get a foot in the door because they can't get enough communities together.
Okay.
So I think if we, our RPC, could get enough communities together, 3 or 4, it would be some good competition.
So, here's a question for you. So it seems like we've missed the RFP for this coming school, you know, for
Yes.
19, for,
Because it starts July 1st.
right. So we've kind of missed that round.
Yep.
But so when would be the next wave or the next process that?
Well, it'd be July of 2019 would be the implementation. So you start
Around
negotiating
December, or
in October, November of this
October,
year.
November, okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's good timing, and that maybe we'll throw electricity and propane
Right.
and oil.
I think it falls,
By
right.
then.
You can stagger these things.
Yeah, well, we definitely need to stagger them.
Yeah.
So October, November timeframe.
I think sometimes in a case like this, the existing contractor becomes a subcontractor where the big
Also
bidder.
possible.
But under more management scrutiny that way, and with help from above if they want it.
Yeah, if they need like 3 more buses, they can be
You know,
hauled up.
share a reserve, better recruiting, better benefits for drivers, things like that.
So, so this is the situation, so, we're moving forward with this, it's gonna continue to grow as a part of the organization and continue to take up a larger share of our dues.
But I think we should look at some form of remuneration for those services.
I think, you know, it's,
At some point in
yeah, it would
time.
be good to do that. I mean, it's, you know, with the electricity, you know, you didn't say that already, that it's, you know, we've saved almost as much as we get in dues with that one program. So it would be good to find ways. I know there are some other models where, you know, you pay like in order to be part of the bid, you pay like a bid fee
Yeah, right.
or something.
Percentage or something.
Yeah, something like that, where you pay, if you want to be part of our group RFP, you have to pay something to do that.
A nominal fee, okay, that if you get enough of them participating, will make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to get the program established
And that's what
first,
we're doing,
and then
right.
it sells better.
And yeah, I think we're all of that opinion that, you know, it'd be nice to have some income from this thing, but it's more important that we.
You gotta get it established.
But, you know, a lot of people are talking about too, that this is just a good exercise to get communities working together. That, you know, this is building regionalism, and, you know, which is good for us, being a regional planning commission, to build that ethic. Because, you know, some communities wonder, why am I part of a regional planning commission at all? I don't need anybody else. We're doing fine. Why do we need to be pay to be part of a region? So we need to answer that question.
At least with this,
Allocated some funding for looking at regionalizing its police and fire
I was gonna
programs.
ask that, is how does the county government structure fit into this concept?
It's a good question. I mean, we recently, 3 regional planning commissions, North Country, Upper Valley, and myself met with the Grafton County Commissioners, because the Upper Valley director used to be a town manager, and he had a good relationship with them, and we just wanted to go talk to them about ways that we could collaborate, and they were very interested in finding ways to work with the RPCs. Because they're really really trying to limit what they do to, you know, to just a few things, and they themselves could benefit from these group purchasing contracts. They have a bunch of stuff where they're overpaying because they're not a very large contract themselves, so they could benefit. Some of it's not uncommon for counties to pay dues to the Regional Planning Commission. In most other regions, the counties are paying dues to the Regional Planning Commission. We don't
Regions
have,
within New Hampshire?
yes,
Really?
yes. They're not big dues. I don't have the full survey of it. I know in North Country though, all three counties paid dues to the Regional Planning Commission. You know, we don't currently have any of our counties paying dues to Lakes Region Commission, you know, and the thought of going to Belknap County right now is probably not,
Political suicide.
Well, it seems like, you know, I think all this is good, but in contrast to what we've done historically, providing services on an intermittent basis when asked for, this is administrative function. You know, we'd end up administrating an area busing system or administrating whatever. And is that what we're supposed to be? Are we gonna turn into an administrative, as opposed to, I always saw counties as an administrative organization. I don't know what they administrate, but are we gonna become an
Because we're bigger than
administrative?
the county. I mean, we're larger than the counties. The RPCs encompass multiple counties.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's the
I
question I'm
think it's a
asking
very-
is one of function, or are we, should we be moving towards being an administrative organization as opposed to, it doesn't say in our charter, you know, you will administer public service programs. We don't administer public service programs.
it's certainly a question I've thought a lot about, and that's one of the reasons why I favor this idea of negotiating
a
pricing.
fee, yeah.
And then having individual contracts administered through the towns. You know, instead of us administering one major regional contract like we do with the HHW, we administer one big regional contract. But I think you put your finger on it. I mean, there are other models of, you know, there's councils of government that are, you know, the regional planning commissions and councils of government where I think this is done, you know, more of a model of a council of government than an RPC, but sometimes I don't know what the difference is. So it is a question that goes really to our purpose and function and.
So
but at the
the
same-
increase in staff you need would be to pursue and negotiate these agreements, not to run the program, but once we had an agreement.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the initial getting, like, you know, I had, for the electricity, I had an intern working full-time, 40 hours a week for, you know, over 3 months, and I spent a good deal of my time working with her. So it took a big chunk of time to get up and running.
But that's the first time.
Right.
After that, it should diminish and keep getting
Sure.
shorter.
Once it's running, then you
Well,
don't need that
You don't need that
continuing-
extensive, but you need to be able to negotiate each year to get those contracts, to know who's going to sign up. The RFP gets out, gets returned, and then just administrate the contract and make sure the towns sign it.
I mean, our legislation was written over 50 years ago, and a lot of what we've done over the last 50 years has been growth management and you know, but that's in master plan development, and those services are being less demanded by our communities, and our communities are increasingly, it seems to me, asking what is the value of membership, and this is an answer, but notwithstanding the issue that you raised, Bob, so I think it's a
Fine line.
It's a dynamic issue here that we're talking about, and we are talking about changing our focus and somewhat,
I think we were talking about adding.
adding, enhancing, you know, depending on what your thoughts are, you know, all those words can apply.
Yeah. And if we're adding, then it gets back to, well, who's gonna pay for this?
Yeah, we need to look at some form of structured pavement.
I'm just out of curiosity, on, when a survey like this, that we're reading about the different towns, who in a town is asked the question?
That's always the interesting thing, I mean,
Right.
because it is different.
Right,
It's
I'm
different in
curious,
that
I see that we
every
said
town
no, but I'm
almost has
wondering who
somebody-
said no.
And it depends on what it is. I mean, for the electricity, you know, it was, in one town, it would be one person, and another, you know, one town, or one school district, it would be the superintendent, the other one, it would be the finance director. And in one town, it would be, you know, a certain selectman, another one, it would be a town manager, and another one, it would be an admin and an executive assistant that worked for the town manager. It all depended, and that's where a lot of the time came in, that, you know, it could be different for different contracts though. For electricity, you would need to talk to somebody. For propane, you might need to talk to somebody else. For for catch basins, you might need to talk to the public works director. So it really depends on what it is, on who we need to talk to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In something like that, is it reasonable to, maybe you did, so I'm not, maybe, but an explanation of the benefits of having this happen? Like are the
Oh, yeah.
benefits of doing this catch basin cleaning?
Yep.
And therefore the effort to do a regional program and blah, 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 and negotiate prices and all that.
Right.
Is that explained carefully so that the person saying no knows it? Or is it just, oh, by the way, so-and-so, do you wanna do this, you know? And
I mean, with the catch basin, we're really at the preliminary stage of just gathering information, so I've done a little explanation of why we want to be interested in catch basins,
But to whom?
but I haven't, I think, you know,
I don't mean a name, but like in general, a committee meeting, you have that regional group meet? You have a.
that's been one of the ways that I've worked. Another way has been the TAC. The TAC group has a lot of public works directors, and then other times we just send emails out to the select board chair, maybe the planning board chair, maybe the public works director. We have
Okay.
all those contact lists.
All right, on the planning board, never saw this.
No, I don't think that we sent the catch basin to the planning board because I don't think.
It's not the same.
It wouldn't go to the planning
It
board.
wouldn't, I agree. In other words, it isn't over yet. In other words, towns can still add on if they
I
so
haven't-
choose.
We haven't started.
Yeah, we haven't started the catch basin. We haven't even fully determined we're gonna do the
Okay,
catch basin
right.
cleaning. And, because I was just trying to figure out how many catch basins there are, how much towns currently pay, what their contracts look like.
Yeah.
That's all I've
Right,
been able to gather so far.
I-
And
now
then
that I've
finding
seen
other
this, I'll-
things that might take priorities, like I have this oil and propane
Yeah.
and the electricity,
Okay.
and maybe even the school busing, so.
There isn't a lot of savings in catch basin. Northfield pays about $3,000 a year to clean basins. And if you knock 10% off that, you're gonna be lucky, so we might save $300.
Yeah.
Not a lot of money.
I would, my personal feeling is that whichever of these efforts that you're talking about that's the most beneficial is what you focus on.
Yeah.
Like
Like
the electric
oil
is
and
great.
propane are big bucks, so.
Are you excluding natural gas?
Not necessarily, no,
Okay.
no.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. So I did want to save some time to talk about commission meeting schedule and the annual meeting,
Let's do that before we do the roundtable.
okay?
Okay.
I think in your packet you do have a schedule, updated schedule. So we're required to have 6 meetings a year, and so if we have one in April, May, and June, we will have had our 6 meetings, so I'm thinking that proposing not to have one in March right now, or at least I haven't scheduled one in March. So the one in April would be April 23rd. It needs to be in the Ossipee area, sub-region. And looking at a Route 16 corridor study as the topic. There's also the Northern Border Regional Commission that covers, I'm trying to find issues that are specific to the sub-area, which, you know, I'd like to do that more, because I think that's what the sub-area meetings were intended for. So provide a regional sharing update. The Northern Border Regional Commission is a grant program that's available to Grafton and Carroll County communities. So I'd give them an update. And then the Route 16 study, I think I talked to the board about DOT being interested in funding more corridor studies, and the governor and council supporting that effort. So, and Executive Councilor Kenny would like to update the Route 16 corridor study. So I thought that would be a great topic for an Ossipee subregion. In May, the fourth Monday in May happens to be Memorial Day. So I wondered about changing that date. The location again is in the Franklin subregion, and I don't know if people are still interested in, when we did the Winnipesaukee River Basin Program meeting, the weather was bad and we weren't able to do a tour. They invited us back if we wanted to do it, so we could look at doing that. We've done a lot of brownfields work down in Franklin, so I thought that would be a very good topic. And then they also have this whitewater park where they've gotten an EDA grant to do a feasibility study on creating a whitewater rafting course through the middle of Franklin on the Winnipesaukee River. They would have to engineer that part of the river and take out some rocks and move things around and make it, but it would be the only place
Going White River
basically in the east where you could have competitive whitewater rafting competitions, and it would bring some vibrancy to the community, bring a lot of young people, make it more of a happening place. So Franklin's pretty excited about it. It's kind of an exciting concept, and I think it would be interesting to hear more about that.
I love the combination of the regional sewer, brownfields, and whitewater. I don't think about that's kind of funny.
Well, it would be a combination of some or all of those. I don't know how we could, I'm not sure we could do all three in one meeting, but I didn't know if anyone was chomping at the bit to tour around the different lagoons. If there wasn't, I didn't want to. I wanted to give everyone a second chance to do that if they wanted to.
So was it still that Monday? Did you change the day?
No, I think we should talk about changing the
Gotta
date.
change the date, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Probably should be the 21st.
21st would be the third Monday. And then, then we'd get into June and we have the annual meeting. And the Monday after the 28th is June 4th, and we have our annual meeting on the 25th. So I think probably the 21st makes the most sense.
Yeah, good. Everybody okay with that?
May 21st.
We need to get the mayor back from Florida. We'll be all set.
Right.
The only drawback with that, that's a Guilford Planning Board meeting night, but
Okay, yeah. That would be, it's in the Ossipee subregion, so you'd probably be especially excused for not going to that one, but I don't know, did you have any other suggestions, Ben?
no. That works.
Okay, so is that done?
Yep, that's
Okay.
good.
So,
I'll just throw in, I don't know how quickly they're gonna take action on the Plymouth thing, but they act reasonably quickly. Plymouth would be a good place for the annual meeting.
that's that's the next topic, and yeah, that would be a suggestion. I don't know if are you thinking the Common Man, or?
Croc TV.